Shadow Hack. By Great Lord of Cloudland. Summary. By coincidence, Lee Yunmyu found a super machine from humanity's age of darkness. From that point onwards, his ordinary life would never be the same. Aptitude? Innate talent? What are these? Could they be eaten? I have neither aptitude nor innate skill, but my shadow can level up using hacks. Experience, ability points, battle prowess, all of them could be hacked. Even while he is asleep or tired, he could still increase his skills. Ding! Your shadow has killed an ant, you have gained experience points and ability points. Ding! Your shadow has successfully killed a dragonfly, it dropped a dimensionality box. Crap! Even killing insects can also increase his experience and get him rewards. What else? Chapter 1, Mysterious Shadow. Translator, Mercurial Editor, The Real Seal. Do you want to understand the meaning of your life? Do you really want to be alive? Within a small warm room, just as Lee Yunmyu had turned on his computer, this line suddenly popped up in front of him. Hey! Isn't this the marketing strategy for that game Darkness of Mankind? Countless people have already milked it previously. Now, which idiot wants to use this to attract people's attention? Lee Yunmyu clearly knew that regardless of whether he chooses yes or no, the result would be the same, that he would be falling into the trap of another person. Perhaps the computer would exit to some promotion link of the game, or perhaps some Trojan horse would enter the computer, causing it to crash. Moreover, Lee Yunmyu was an extremely bored person. He neither wants to know the meaning of life nor worries about what was meant by really being alive. In any case, as an ordinary person born in an ordinary place, there was no need for him to learn the meaning of life. Speaking frankly, with his family, his genes, his background, his heritage, he was basically bound to be an ordinary person from the moment he was born. Without any unexpected accidents, his later generations were also doomed to be ordinary, unless some miracle occurred. Since you have worked so hard for this master, I will play with you a little. Thus, even if Lee Yunmyu knew that he shouldn't be fooled, the most important thing was he was senselessly bored, so he lightly clicked on it. As soon as he clicked on it, the scene on his computer screen quickly changed. Do you want to obtain the skills to surpass others? Do you want to realize the true essence of life? Do you want to stand at the peak of this cosmos? If you want to, then drop your blood to bind this system. When the outdated, broken, small loudspeaker of the computer said this in its enticing voice as always, Lee Yunmyu almost puffed blood on his computer screen. Lying bastard, who is trying to prank me, does he believe that I have no brain? This time, Lee Yunmyu's excitement was stirred up. Interesting, interesting, this has some creativity, this has taken mischievousness to new heights, but who will be so foolish as to really cut their fingertip and drop blood on the computer display? But regardless of whatever was said, Lee Yunmyu's next movement fully reflected how busy he was. He was so extraordinarily free that being free had also become a pain in his ass. He laughed mischievously and lightly peeled open the wound on his thumb, which seemed fine after observing it carefully. This small wound had been cut in the morning while slicing a fruit, and it still had some semi-condensed blood. Immediately, without thinking, he raised the thumb's wound and lightly pressed it on the strange icon that had appeared on the screen. The outcome was seen within a flash. His whole screen was filled with golden lights. Congratulations, you have successfully bound the Supreme Shadow Hack system, you are currently the only binder of the system. Ding! Detecting a huge disparity between world's information and system's data, the system cannot provide a map for practicing, the system will import the real-world map and update the data. Magic Beast Abyss, Barbarian Ox Cave, Devil Spirit's Well, Nine Dragon Slope, Deep Tiger Gorge, Moonlight City, Witch Subduing Pagoda, Restricted Area of Hell, Heavenly Sanctuary, Ancient Road, Beyond the Heavens Sword Mound, and so on. The hack map is now deleted. The system has begun to enter the information based on the current world data and produce an all-new map. Please be patient. Oh. This slightly stunned Lee Yun-mu. What supreme shadow hack system? What the hell is this? This seems like a cheating software to level up, wasn't it supposed to be outdated? Nowadays, who still plays such a game where one increases one's levels on computer? If his financial situation had been any better, he would have already purchased the Dimension Helmet and entered the virtual world to pass the time. Could it be that this broken computer was a genuine product of the Dark Era? Once he thought of this, Lee Yun-mu's heart burst with joy. He had just bought this computer yesterday from the antique street. It was just an outdated product, so the price he had to pay was also only 13 fourth-dimensional coins. But Lee Yun-mu clearly knew that even though it seemed like a genuine antique, in reality, it was just some cheap imitation made by some dishonest dealer. After all, if it really was an old product from Dark Era, then why would it be sold for some measly fourth-dimensional coins? A genuine computer from the Dark Era would certainly have a starting price of fifth-dimensional coins. How could such a commoner like himself have the qualifications to access the Alliance's fifth-dimensional coins? After few minutes, a ding sound came from the system, transmitting a commanding notification which caused Lee Yun-mu to become serious. System had been upgraded. Does host wants to use shadow hack and level up? Yes. Lee Yun-mu was full of expectations. He excitedly observed for a moment. Soon after, he decided on a training location and clicked on it to confirm. You have selected a high-level region, the Forbidden Countryside region, as the training location. Since you have selected a high-grade map, with your low-level strength comparable to Dreg's, there is no doubt that you will get wrecked, so the system proposes that you choose a low-level region, District Garden, as a training location. Do you wish to accept it? Just as the computer beeped, Lee Yun-mu was thoroughly dumbfounded. This hack map area can really take away someone's life. Wasn't it supposed to just be a prank from the beginning? You gotta be kidding me. District Garden. What is this? Could it be that this District Garden also has some monster in it? While regretting that he even couldn't pick the choice that he desired, he callously clicked on it to confirm. Supreme Shadow activated. Training location is District Garden. Monster bots classification: Grade 1 Ant, Grade 1 Flea, Grade 2 Ladybug, Grade 3 Caterpillar, Grade 3 Moth, Grade 3 Honeybee, Grade 3 Butterfly, Grade 5 Spider. Warning: avoid dimensional and mutant insects as much as possible. Pop. Lee Yun-mu looked at the warning which had popped up on the screen and was once again almost on the verge of puffing blood. This is the game of the Dark Era's elders? The monsters are all ants, honeybees, this kind of insects. It had to be said that at this moment, Lee Yun-mu felt quite sorrowful for the elders from the Darkness Era. The quality of their entertainment was quite worrying. But in the next moment, he cried out in fear when under his attentive gaze, his shadow suddenly came to life. Materialization? Yes, the shadow formed from light had suddenly come alive. It then shrunk to the size of 1 centimeter. Under Lee Yun-mu's shocked gaze, this little shadow started to walk slowly, gradually speeding up. Shoo! Then it ran out of the bedroom, not getting obstructed when passing through the room, then the hallway. After it crossed 36 floors, it finally arrived at the District Garden downstairs. It went under the grass and immediately began to look for monsters. At this moment, a series of characters and sounds began to appear on computer screen. Automatically entered hack map automatically began to search for monsters. Found Grade 1 Ant Super Shadow Monster Killing Mode, engaged. At this point, Lee Yun-mu's figure became lifeless. Chapter 2, Flux Energy Awakens. Unbelievable. Even if he was stupid, at this moment, he clearly realized that he had stumbled upon some kind of miracle. Oh my god, is this game supposed to be like this? This is not a dream, is this real? Lee Yun-mu's widely opened eyes were fixed on the screen, where the shadow could be seen among the grass, encountering an enormous ant. The shadow raised its fist and attacked it ferociously. You have attacked the ant with your full strength, causing it 7 points of damage, but because your strength is too weak, it could only cause a minor injury to the ant. Your leg has kicked the ant's head. Because of attacking its weak point, the ant has suffered 26 points of damage, causing serious damage to the ant. The ant has begun its counterattack after entering a near-death state. Lifting its pincers, it crushed your right arm, resulting in you losing most of your military strength. You bellowed in pain and launched a kick. Because you were extremely angry, this kick has caused furious strike, causing the ant 19 points of damage. The ant has been killed by you. Congratulations, you have successfully killed the ant. You have gained 1 experience point and 1 ability point, but you have also caught the attention of the ant colony. Beware of their revenge. Damn! Li Yunmia was astonished. The ant was dead. It had really been killed by his shadow. It must be known that this was only one ant from the real world. Even though it was minute, it was still alive. Was this really only a hack system, only a software? Li Yunmia was filled with excitement and suspicion. But regardless of whatever he felt, the hack system still continued its work. Not long had passed, when the shadow in the dense grass forest encountered yet another ant. However, this time there were no surprises, and the shadow, which had already lost its right arm, got killed immediately by the second ant. When the shadow was crushed, it transformed into countless black dots and passed through all obstructions from the lawn downstairs as it returned back inside Li Yunmu's body. Another message popped up on the screen. Shadow has died. After 10 minutes, your shadow will resurrect and continue to advance automatically in the hack system. You still have 2 more chances of resurrection for today, please cherish them. Reminder, the system has detected some kind of strength inside your body. Do you want to use your current experience points to awaken it? Yes. Li Yunmia didn't think too much about it. He was already dizzy from the big meat pie that had fallen into his lap, so he subconsciously agreed. Within an instant, he sensed a kind of warmth in his body, traces of heat collected in his chest from his 4 limbs and hundreds of bones. A kind of strength seemed to come forth from deep inside. How is it possible? Is this flux energy? This sensation seems like the first sign of flux energy awakening. Flux energy, an ordinary person would forever remain unfamiliar with these words, because these words represent strength in current new dimension era. It represents the wide gap between ordinary people and those who have this innate talent. However, this wide gap was like a great wall which ordinary people could never ever scale over. It was rumored that in the year 2020 AD, a huge shooting star had crashed into the Earth from outer space. This shooting star from the space was precisely the one known as dimensional shooting star to the later generations. It was responsible for the transformation to humankind to the current new age. At that time, when the dimensional shooting star crashed into the Earth, in a flash, the Earth's entire continental structure was shattered. A large number of countries and countless people perished because of it. Of the Earth's entire population of 7.6 billion at that time, only several hundred million had survived. The rest were wiped out in a flash. But that was only the beginning of bad things to come. Within 3 days after the dimensional stone had descended, large amounts of mighty higher dimensional energy spread over the entire Earth, filling each and every nook and cranny of the Earth. Once the dimensional energy appeared, its influence did not only stop at people. Animals, insects, plants, fishes, even including the entire human race, all of them started to evolve. In just one night, all the wild animals transformed and became more formidable. Humanity's machine guns and artillery shells couldn't rival them anymore. The human race was no longer the most dominant race on Earth. In less than 3 months, most of humanity's armies were destroyed. The entire human race sunk into great despair because of the threat of annihilation, and it could only depend on the troops stationed in the major cities to defend them till death. This was humanity's first time losing the territories outside of major cities. Vast stretches of land turned into the backyard of mutant beasts and dimensional beasts. That year would be famously known as the first year of Dark Ages to the later generations. From then on, humanity's era entered into the abyss. After the continental structure shattered, only 6 continents remained. Humanity kept struggling at death's door for the first 3 years of the Dark Ages. When the first of humankind finally experienced the 3-year-long evolution and began to awaken the flux energy, only then did a ray of hope dawn on humanity. From then on, the human race turned into a civilization which placed flux energy cultivation above all else, compared to science and technology from before. After 227 years of great efforts by the elders, humanity once again regained the position of Earth's master. They fought with dimensional beasts and mutant beasts and managed to reclaim more stretches of land for survival, finally establishing the new dimensional age, bidding farewell to the Dark Ages. At the same time, on one day, the 6 continents formally established a grand alliance, known as the Humankind Alliance. The continents were the Central Continent, Northern Ocean Continent, Southern Pole Continent, Holy Continent, Desolate Continent, and Higher Dimensional Continent. These continents constituted humanity's remnant forces. The Central Continent was where Li Yunmia was currently living. It was formed from the majority of the former Chinese nationals and several countries at the periphery of Asia. In terms of influence among the 6 continents, it was considered the most formidable. Next in the alliance was the Holy Continent, which was dominated by the Vatican authority of religion from before the Dark Ages. Formed by gathering several powers from Western Europe, its strength was only second to the Central Continent. It was rumored that this Holy Continent, that was formed on the firm belief in religion, also had another mysterious power apart from flux energy. Next in terms of strength were the Desolate Continent and the Higher Dimensional Continent, which had the weakest influence in the alliance. Especially the Higher Dimensional Continent, it was the most severely impacted continent when the dimensional shooting stars crashed into the Earth. Even today, the Higher Dimensional Continent still produces a constant stream of large numbers of dimensional monsters. As for the people of this continent, rather than saying they were a force of humanity, it would not be wrong to say they were just leading an ignoble existence. Thus, in the new dimensional age, the genuine forces of humanity were only the 4 continents, the Central Continent, Northern Ocean Continent, Southern Pole Continent and Holy Continent. But if you must include the pathetic survivors of Higher Dimensional Continent and Desolate Continent, then that would make up the 6 continents in the alliance. Naturally, the bitter historical experiences of these continents all digressed from one another. But it cannot be denied that flux energy was very significant for humanity as it provided humanity formidable strength. Therefore, only the people who could use flux energy were considered genuinely superior existence. These people who could use flux energy would receive the best treatment in every continent. They had the best lives, the most spacious houses. They enjoyed the best which humanity had to offer, enjoying the least contaminated food and were at the top of humanity's hierarchy. Everything they got was simply not something that an ordinary people could hope to receive. Chapter 3, Opportunity for Advancement. Flux energy, do I really have the hope of awakening the flux energy? Signs of tears appeared in his eye at this moment. Without flux energy, he would have forever remained an ordinary, inferior person. His future generations would also remain ordinary and the cycle would continue. Every commoner wanted to break free from this cycle, but the chances of being able to succeed were almost zero. However, it wasn't like there were absolutely no chances. For every 1,000 people, if there were 2 or 3 who managed to awaken flux energy, it would have already been considered as a very high percentage and a great fortune. Apart from this, if one has immense wealth or manages to get the assistance of someone influential, then that person could obtain a dimensional crystal, which was priced extremely high, and use its power to try to awaken flux energy. However, if the awakening fails, then the cycle of inferiority would continue again. Only those, whose previous generations or parents have awakened the formidable flux energy, were the truly fortunate ones, the proud sons and daughters of heaven. They were the only ones who enjoyed the strongest innate bloodline genes carrying flux energy, and so it was easiest for them to awaken it. Although this was a great benefit, it had no relation to Li Yunmu, not even a speck of relation. because both his parents as well as his previous generations were all ordinary people. Fortunately, the heavens were not unjust and didn't cause them to rot in the lowest rung of society feeling hopelessness and despair. Since the higher dimensional force was present everywhere in the world, everyone was born with a flux energy seed within their body. As long as they experience some miracle or their family possesses sufficient wealth, then there was a faint chance of being able to change their fate and provide hope to their family's descendants. And now, Lee Yunmu had the opportunity to cash in on that chance. He had only gained one experience point and the result was that the threshold of awakening was shaken, but since it was only one experience point the threshold was loosened a little and he hasn't awakened completely yet. Presently, he could only loosen the threshold by that much, but what if he obtained even more experience points, what happens then? 10 points, 100 points. While Lee Yunmu was getting more and more excited, from outside his room, the sound of his mom's voice penetrated into the room. "You brat, the meal is on the table, what time do you think it already is and you still have the mood to play games?" Coming. Lee Yunmu excitedly replied, agreeing in a loud voice. Not long after, within a comfortable small dining hall, the table was filled with 3 meat and 2 vegetable dishes and 1 soup. So sumptuous! What's the occasion today? Lee Yunmu didn't wash his hand before quickly grabbing a sweet and sour pork chop and shoved it in his mouth. He loudly said in unclear voice. So good, so good. 3 meat and 2 vegetable dishes, this was quite normal in families that were wealthy, but normally, ordinary families didn't dare to be so extravagant. Although in the dimensional age the land under humans' control was much greater compared to the Dark Ages, in the countryside areas, vast stretches of land were still occupied by variation beasts and dimensional beasts. Thus, such a sumptuous evening meal would have cost at least 34th dimensional coins. At the slums, this amount was sufficient for the poor people to survive for a whole month. Even in an ordinary household, 3 meat and 2 vegetable dishes were still considered quite extravagant. Naturally it is a happy occasion. Just now, your father sent a news that a few days ago, he was formally appointed as the camp captain when the camp isn't moving. His mom, H.A.C.K, said, unable to contain her happiness. Good news, this is really great news. Lee Yunmu's brows rose because of excitement. Great news was coming in wave after wave. Today was simply the most fortunate day of his life. Until today, his father had been the deputy in the squad, but now, after being promoted, he would be a person with real, genuine authority. Although he cannot be compared to a government official, but within the army, he would have great authority. Good, but let's not speak of your dad's matter for now. The important thing is your exams which happened a few days ago. How did they go? H.A.C.K wasn't that easy to deal with. Changing the subject, she inquired about his high school exams from a few days ago. Hey, Mom, can't we leave this disappointing matter for another time? It's not like you don't know how your son would perform, yet you still ask how it went. Why not just let nature take its course? Lee Yunmu's mood dampened after hearing about his exams. He didn't want to talk about the matters of exams as he didn't expect anything from them. In this new age, an ordinary person has 3 routes that they could take. The first route was following the same structure of society as was done before the Dark Ages. From primary school to middle school, then going on to higher education. Normally, the lowest rung people would undergo education in a primary school for 5 years since it was free. Afterwards, they would go out into the real world and seek a livelihood. Because of the tuition fee for middle school, these poor people couldn't afford it, so their knowledge was limited and they could only take on the lowest and hardship-filled jobs like janitors and other jobs like that. For those people whose family's condition was slightly better, they would continue to middle school. Those who graduate from middle school formed the most basic layer of the society. After their graduation, their lives were somewhat better than those unskilled laborers and they were accepted in the service industry and so on. And finally, were people like Lee Yunmu, whose background was slightly well-to-do. They had even more choices and could continue on to higher education after graduating from middle school. They would generally take up jobs in logistics related to the army and government. Regardless of the income they get, their positions were more honorable compared to the previous two. But those who walk this road were bound to not have many accomplishments in future. All of them would have to work as dispensable civilian jobs within the city, with no great achievements. They could only take on the lowest rung jobs in society. Originally, with Lee Yun-mu's talent, in the future, at most he would be working as a logistics worker within the army and government, but now, he was clear that perhaps with the super S.H.A.D.O.W hack system, he could possibly change his destiny. The second route was to study in a military school to become ordinary soldiers. The treatment and salary of frontline soldiers were pretty good, but the probability of dying and losing one's life was equally great. In today's world, with variation beasts and dimensional beasts running amok in the wild, not just one person, but the whole unit might have bad luck and get wiped out completely. His dad, Lee Zongmin, had indeed walked this road. In addition, because he had produced a trace of flux energy, he could be considered to have taken the first step of flux energy awakening. Therefore, his dad entered the war god troops and his position was raised even higher compared to normal soldiers. The third route was becoming a follower of a fluxer, taking the road of becoming a subordinate. Their treatment was even better compared to government soldiers and their position developed according to their master's circumstances. They can even receive assistance from the fluxer and obtain dimensional crystals, thus greatly increasing the probability of awakening and turning into a genuine flux disciple. However, there was a rigid condition that the person must attain at least half threshold of complete awakening. Otherwise, which fluxer would take a loser as a follower? Thus, Lee Yun-mu didn't think about it. Until now, he wouldn't even dare to think about becoming a follower of a fluxer. Naturally, there was a fourth route, but this path could only be said to be an extravagant hope for the common people, that was to genuinely awaken flux energy. As for the routes that Lee Yun-mu could walk, he had two options. One was to become ordinary logistics staff, the other was to use his dad's connection and enter the army and become a soldier. He was not very good at former, he didn't have sufficient assurance for latter. After all, it's not like everyone who desires to enter the army can get into the army. With the intense competition and Lee Yun-mu's family background, he didn't have complete assurance. I knew this would happen. Fortunately, your father and I both didn't have any great expectations for you. These few years, we have saved some money. Tomorrow, I will make a call to your father, asking him to use this money to create better relations with his old comrades and ask them for help. His mother lightly sighed, but soon smiled again. Good, your path has already been arranged for you. Now, if your grades are not good then they are not good, eat quickly or the food will get cold. That's great. Lee Yun-mu vaguely replied with his mouth filled, but a trace of emotion stirred in his heart. Perhaps he can't compare with those proud sons and daughters of heavens, but he was already really fortunate to be born in this family in this age. He silently swore to return to his room as soon as possible and seize every moment to kill waves of ants and caterpillars. Maybe he could absorb even more experience, maybe he could even completely awaken his flux energy after gaining more experience. Even if he could only reach half awakening, then he could at least become a follower of a formidable person, which was also good. However, at this moment, He-ji's stellar comm lit up. By the time his mother completed her call, the expressions on her face had turned bad. Mom, what happened? Lee Yun-mu asked anxiously. This era's calling were quite costly. Ordinary families can use the stellar comms for communication, but this time his mom had accepted the call, surely it must have been from his dad. For both mother and son, their biggest fear was receiving Lee Zongmin's message, not for any other reason, fearing that he may have met with some accident. As someone who was stationed at the front lines every day of the year, every year, he would have to face several attacks by dimensional beasts or variation beasts. They would be fortunate if they only had to face a small tide of beasts, but all of them dreaded to encounter an irresistible tide of formidable beasts, which could possibly annihilate the whole unit. There's no problem, thank God that your father survived. Son, your father had been attacked by a tide of beasts. Now, he has a little trouble, so I will have to go and see him at Heavenly Cloud City Hospital. The distance to Heavenly Cloud City is quite far from here, so take care of yourself," his mother said with slightly red eyes. She quickly ate her dinner and left soon after packing some light clothes. Li Yunmu's mouth was wide open. He wanted to say that he would go with her, but after thinking of the cost of taking train to Heavenly Cloud City, he couldn't voice his thoughts. Chapter 4, Dimensional Box. Li Yunmu didn't know how to return to the room. After hearing that his dad has met with an accident, his mind was completely distracted. He couldn't even enjoy the sumptuous evening meal. Chasing after his mom to the outside, he only managed to get one piece of information. His father's camp had been attacked by dimensional beasts and his father, who had been celebrating his promotion, had managed to survive, but at the cost of both his legs. Furthermore, somehow, even more bad luck had fallen on him. Because the whole camp of soldiers had been annihilated without a single survivor. He had acted in a manner unfitting of his role as the camp's captain and had chosen to run away to save his life. Now, the military seemed to want him to take responsibility and judged that he didn't act as the captain by choosing to flee instead of fighting. Regarding this matter, Li Yunmu wasn't entirely convinced. His father had always been a sincere and brave man, so how could he have behaved like this? After thinking about the point that all the soldiers in the camp had died, maybe this time, his dad was only being pushed out to take responsibility and become a scapegoat. Even if Li Yunmu knew that he wasn't reliable, after this day, for the first time, he realized that he was weak and powerless. Until now, within this small family of three, Li Zongmin was the most reliable person. But after losing both his legs and his job, he was now also under investigation for the suspicion of fleeing alone. Li Yunmu, who was contently passing his days with his small family, instantly felt the reality around him collapsing. Slums? With his father losing his job and income, let alone using his relations to make Li Yunmu enter the army, even being able to live in a city was going to be an issue. Once he thought of the life in the slums, recalling those starved faces, thirsty, numb, desperate expressions, Li Yunmu shook his head resolutely. Both his dad and mom were old, they certainly couldn't withstand this loss. In one night, Li Yunmu seemed to have matured greatly. Maybe before today, he could still pass his days without any ambitions, but now he can't. Now that his father had lost his both legs, he must become his family's backbone and must support them. His gaze fell upon that old desktop. System, I hope you are still reliable. He faintly sighed as a trace of hope appeared in his eyes. Although right now he couldn't go to Heavenly Cloud City to see his dad, he knew that right now, he must become stronger. Ding, the Super Shadow hack has started. Do you still intend to choose the district garden as the training location? Yes. He loosely said. Everything that was happening in front of his eyes was definitely mystical but certainly not a dream. Li Yunmu's heart, which had been tightened whole day, finally relaxed. As soon as he pressed enter, his shadow seemed to have been activated. The shadow automatically walked down his building and entered the little garden, stepping forward into those tall and mighty grass woods. This time, Li Yunmu had made his resolution. He must personally control the shadow and kill those monsters. System, can I control the shadow manually? If you want to control this hack manually, choose the option Manual Hacking. The system displayed these instructions almost immediately. Li Yunmu analyzed this for some time before he realized something. Accurately speaking, the controls of the Super Shadow hack system were very simple. Altogether, there were 3 adjustments that could be made. The first was to determine the training location from the map. After the map had been synchronized with the real world, the present system's training locations were actual real-world locations. This district garden training location was just the small lawn downstairs, the nearest and most rudimentary training location. The second adjustment was the choice to use either automatic hacking or manual hacking, as well as setting up the hacking time. The unit of time was in hours. The third adjustment was the ability to control which monsters were targeted for leveling after choosing a good training location, as well as avoiding formidable monsters that he doesn't dare to provoke. Higher levels of adjustments were only found in automatic hacking mode. Even if Lee Yun-mu, a person from New Age, had never played with this kind of simple software before, just by sweeping his eyes over them once, he understood all the bits and pieces of the system. The instant he selected manual hacking, his whole world immediately transformed. What? My consciousness had surprisingly descended into the shadow. Shocked, Lee Yun-mu surprisingly discovered that now he could control the shadow as if it was himself. The shadow had already shrunk to the size of 1 centimeter. When he controlled the shadow to raise its head, all he saw in front of him was a dense stretch of large grass forest. It was clear that this grass was originally only 5 centimeters tall, but now that his consciousness had descended into the shadow, that huge grass forest seemed to be omnipresent. Standing in this environment, the shadow seemed to be constricted and felt claustrophobic. System, my consciousness has left my body, will I die? Lee Yun-mu couldn't help but feel anxious. Be relieved, as long as your consciousness returns to your body within 1 day, this hack controls won't cause any damage to you. The system's voice aptly sounded in his mind. After obtaining the assurance from the mystical system, Lee Yun-mu finally laid down the concerns in his heart and began to control the movements of his shadow. Why do I feel like I am in danger? Shaking his head, he removed any extra thoughts and rushed into the depths of grass forests with a fierce howl. This time, he was very lucky. Within few minutes, he very quickly found an ant in a thin grass patch. Taking advantage of the fact that the ant still hasn't turned hostile towards him, Lee Yun-mu quickly rushed towards the ant and ferociously punched it. Ding! Using the strength stored within you, as well as the strength gained because of your momentum from running, you have landed a furious strike on the ant's head. You have attacked the ant's weak point, resulting in your damage being doubled. Because you had gained additional strength with your momentum, it explosively increased the damage dealt to the ant. This attack has dealt 29 points of damage to the ant. Awesome! This broken game can also be played like this. Stored strength, additional strength, weak point attack, furious strike. This was similar to the game Dead House of the New Age. Although he had only played it once, he could work out a lot of tips from it. It was clear that manual hacking provided him much greater control compared to automatic hacking. At this moment, Lee Yun-mu resembled that of a genuine game character, whose aim was to kill monsters. And when compared to virtual reality games, it seemed much more realistic. After landing one punch on the ant, he immediately evaded ant's vision and moved to its blind spot. Hey, this time, he wasn't following the movements of the automatic hacking, which didn't have any wisdom. Why would he remain in front of the ant and allow it to attack him with its pincers? The instant that he dodged was the instant that this unlucky ant suffered from its tragic fate. I will destroy your anus. The instant he reached behind the ant, Lee Yun-mu raised his foot and ruthlessly kicked that ant's big buttocks. The kick's full force crashed into the ant. The kick caused 13 points of damage to the ant. Clearly, the attack power of a leg was much stronger compared to that of a fist. Even though this was just an ordinary kick, the damage it caused was quite impressive. One kick wasn't enough to take it down, but it caused the ant to stumble forward before stopping. Ding! You have kicked the ant with all your might, dealing 13 points of damage to the ant and made its body unstable, which stunned the ant for 2 seconds. Stun! He had once again discovered another little trick. Moreover, it seems like he could control this trick. Interesting. Lee Yun-mu smiled faintly as he learned to control it. This time, he seized the ant's anus and kicked it. Again. This kick precisely landed on that ant's buttocks. You have kicked ant's vital part, dealing triple the damage. You have dealt 36 points of damage to the ant and killed the ant, gaining 1 experience point and 1 ability point. Ding! You have killed the ant and a dimensional box dropped from the ant's body. Cool, That's fantastic. Hearing the system's message, Li Yunmyo couldn't help but clench his fists tightly. This was not some dream. Just by killing a grade 1 ant, he had obtained 1 experience point, but what was this ability point that he had gotten? Being a person from New Age, he had never heard of anything called ability points. Moreover, what was this box that was lying on the ground? Dimensional box? What kind of thing was this? Chapter 5, Ancient Battle Skill. Congratulations, you have obtained an A-grade cultivation method Admiralty cover. Do you want to practice it? Li Yunmyo opened the dimensional box without any concern, and immediately, this information flashed in his mind. Admiralty cover? A-grade cultivation method? What was that? As an ordinary person, the only things that he had heard of were flux energy, ultra flux energy, sacred flux energy and things of that nature. He had only heard of flux energy battle skills which were produced by using a higher dimensional force like flux energy, but what was this cultivation method? He had never heard of it before, but when he took out his stellar COMM and searched for it online, he was astonished. Cultivation method, ancient martial arts used by people of the Dark Ages at their peak, known as cultivation method. Li Yunmyo kept on mumbling this, completely dumbstruck. Once he checked this news, he was greatly astonished. Weren't the flux energy battle skills based off cultivation method? Why was every piece of information about the history of the Dark Ages that was discovered within ruins on the countryside considered priceless? Moreover, whenever they were auctioned, why were they all sold for fifth-dimensional coins? That was because all the formidable high-leveled fluxers all try to find even the tiniest trace of ancient martial arts from the hard disks of computers from the Dark Ages. Even if there was a tiny bit of hope, all those fluxers that were considered unexcelled would rush in like a duck, plundering every last bit of information. This was because all the formidable battle skills used by fluxers had been derived from the ancient martial arts left behind from the Dark Ages. Thus, this term cultivation method was known to people of the New Age as ancient martial arts, which were considered supreme in the eyes of those people with power. And now? By using the super shadow hack system to casually get rid of an ant, he had obtained an ancient martial art? Moreover, it was only an A-grade cultivation method as determined by the system? At this instant, Li Yunmyo took a deep breath. Only now did he realize that he had brought some kind of godly object from the antique street. Indeed, describing it as a godly object wasn't wrong at all. Not good, I must keep this a secret till death, otherwise, if information about it got leaked to others, then... Li Yunmyo didn't dare to think about what would happen next, but this outcome was definitely not something he could support. Even if it was some other formidable fluxer, he also wouldn't be able to bear the disastrous consequences. Reminder, do you want to practice the Admiralty cover cultivation method? Yes. Li Yunmyo snapped to attention. After taking a deep breath, he forced himself to calm down. Cultivating Admiralty cover requires 1 ability point. 1 ability point has been deducted. You have successfully learned the first level of Admiralty cover and your defense has been substantially enhanced. Next second, Li Yunmyo had sensed a warm feeling coming from his inner core. From inside to outside, in an instant, it spread to the other parts of his body, overflowing with a trace of faint golden light. Deep within his brain, a load of information was pouring in. Admiralty cover, this is the first fourth-dimensional ancient martial art created by humanity. For every level that you upgrade it, it will increase your damage resistance. For every 10 levels that it is upgraded, you will acquire a miraculous attribute. You have grasped the first level of Admiralty cover, causing the damage you receive to be reduced by 30%. To reach the next level of Admiralty cover, you require 20 ability points. Information kept on pouring slowly into his brain, but Li Yunmyo's heart couldn't calm down for a long time. An ancient martial art, I learned one that easily. The whole process only consumed 1 ability point? So ability points has such a great use. At this moment, Li Yunmyo discovered that on the surface of his shadow, there was a golden layer of protective armor. Hide! He thought within his heart without saying anything aloud. In the next instant, the layer of golden protective cover, which was enveloping his body like the shell of a hen's egg, gradually hid within his skin. However, for some unknown reason, with just that one thin layer of protective cover, Li Yunmu felt a lot safer inside the grass forests. Reducing the total damage received by 30% was quite unprecedented. Li Yunmu quickly realized the profoundness of an A-grade ancient martial art. When he continued to hunt down monsters, he made a big mistake that resulted in the ant that he encountered biting him fiercely on the arm. Originally, it would have been ripped apart due to the formidable power in the ant's pincers. But this time, because of that layer of resistance, Li Yunmu's hand was surprisingly able to support it. Formidable, formidable indeed. Even if Li Yunmu didn't have much experience, he was able to realize what this meant. The Admiralty cover defensive cultivation method was much more powerful compared to the Flux energy battle skills. Was this power really only from the first, most basic level of this cultivation method? At that moment, Li Yunmu became even more excited. The next level only required 20 ability points. That meant killing 19 more ants would be enough. He continued hunting down monsters. Li Yunmu forgot about time, forgot about everything else. He threw all of his mind into fighting monsters. As time passed, he became more and more skilled. Gradually, he could even face the combined assault of 2 ants at one time. Kill, 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 I must gain even more experience and ability points. For our future, so that we don't have to move to slums. While he was indulged in killing monsters, time passed quickly. After some time, night had arrived, but the shadow seemed to possess night vision. Even within the grass of the district garden, Li Yunmu's visibility wasn't affected at all. However, as the night advanced, the number of monsters within the grass also increased. They also became increasingly stronger. Grade 3 Caterpillar, Grade 4 Grasshopper, Grade 5 Spider, Grade 7 Lizard, Grade 10 Frog. Li Yunmu had never expected that those small lives, which he could casually crush by stepping on them, would become so frightening. Although he cautiously avoided those he could not defeat, he had finally suffered a loss. After he had killed 46 Grade 1 ants, 17 Grade 1 fleas, 5 Grade 2 ladybugs, 3 different types of Grade 2 earthworms, he was finally eaten by a Grade 7 lizard which suddenly appeared from within the grass. When he came to his senses, he was already back in his body. Li Yunmu closed his eyes and analyzed for a long time. Only after thinking over his weak points and deficiency did he then lightly release a breath of impure air. Seemingly, it would be better if he used the hack during the day until he becomes more powerful. The neighborhood garden's lawn becomes exponentially more dangerous at night. System, calculate the amount of experience and ability points received this time. After summarizing his merits and flaws during the fights, now was the time to reap the harvests. Li Yunmu couldn't suppress his excitement. The harvests were indeed enormous. Ding! In this life, the host has managed to obtain a total of 79 experience points and 79 ability points. The existence of some kind of unawakened force in your body was detected, as well as the Admiralty cover cultivation method. Do you desire to use the experience and ability points to assist in its awakening and the advancement of this cultivation method? Yes. This time, Li Yunmu didn't have any hesitation. In next instant, he sensed a warm sensation coming from his stomach and Danshan simultaneously. He thought that his life for the past dozen years was simply a waste. This sensation of obtaining strength little by little was truly exciting. Reminder, the Flux energy seed inside your body had been further strengthened and your Admiralty cover had also been upgraded by 2 levels, your damage resistance had been increased to 32%. Chapter 6, Reality. The Central Continent was considered as the 3rd largest continent among all the continents of the New Age. It was also considered the most prosperous continent. It was spread over 1,668,000 square kilometers. It was 16 times larger compared to the original Hwasya Empire. Spreading over thousands of kilometers horizontally and vertically, it had an extremely vast territory. The central continent contained 3 primary grade cities, 7 secondary grade cities, and many tertiary grade towns. However, the areas that weren't under the protection of cities and towns weren't inhabited by humans, as those areas couldn't resist the attacks from variation and dimensional beasts. The Lucky Wind City was one of these small tertiary grade towns. It was situated on the northern border of the central continent. As the entire northern shore was in contact with the ocean, the geography was quite harsh, the climate was extremely cold, and the area was frequently hit by tsunamis. It was also one of the small towns that wasn't very prosperous on the central continent. This was the place where Lee Yunmu lived. On this day, all of the high schools of Lucky Wind City were ushering in batch after batch of graduating students, even though the vacations had just ended. That was because today was the day when the results of higher education examination were made public. At the same time, today was also the day when the lives of all the students would be changed. After all, apart from receiving their result, there was another extraordinary examination. People called it the Flux test. It was also known as Dragon's Leap, and it only took place on this day every year. If a person was successful, they would be like a carp that leaped over the Golden Gate and transform into a dragon. Their future would be boundless. The Flux test, as the name implies, was actually a test to check if someone's flux energy has awakened. On this day, the Alliance would send out commissioners to all the high schools over the continent to rigorously carry out the examination. Everyone who finished their education would have to face this day. Some would cry tears of joy, but most would naturally renounce the test and just accept their fate. That was because the Dragon's Leap was not such an easy test where just by working hard, you would get desired results. Every time, the test would divide the applicants into 3 classes. The first class was to join the war god troops. As long as anyone under 18 years old could awaken a trace of flux energy, even if it resulted in just a slight reaction, they would all be recommended to enter the troop and become soldiers in the war god troops. Even though they hadn't genuinely awakened, being able to produce trace of flux energy meant that all of them would certainly make great soldiers. One such example would be Lee Yunmu's father, Lee Zongmin. If strictly differentiated, then the position of fighters and soldiers of the war god troops were much higher compared to ordinary troops. The second class consisted of those who were half-awakened. Half-awakened, as the name implied, were those who have awakened half of the threshold for flux energy. Those who were half-awakened couldn't be considered as a genuinely awakened flux disciple, but they were more formidable compared to the war god troops. Thus, the half-awakened fluxers would be recommended to enter the military and they would be directly elected as an officer. Their position would also be much higher than the war god troops. The third class would be those who were completely awakened. Thoroughly awakened as a flux disciple, there was no need to say much about this class. They would directly enter the Alliance's privileged hierarchy and were given many material benefits and privileges which an ordinary people couldn't even hope for. You finally came, are you okay? Originally, there wasn't anything for Lee Yunmu to do in the flux test. 99% of the graduates that came today, came only to collect their results for the higher education exams. Once Lee Yunmu entered the classroom, his desk mate, Zhang Kai, promptly greeted him with concern. In these several days, the matter of dimensional beasts attacking the army camp in Area C of Heavenly Cloud City had spread throughout the whole class. After all, the Lucky Wind City was just a small town on the northern border. It was not very big, and the entire class knew that Lee Yunmu's father was in the war god troops. Even if Lee Yunmu didn't say anything, most of the people would obtain this information sooner or later, so there was no use in hiding it. Still good, my father was comparatively more fortunate and had escaped with his life, so I am all right. Lee Yunmu shook his head. Under the gaze of all his classmates, he sat down on his seat. During these several days, Lee Yunmu's had matured greatly. After his father's incident, his personality had been greatly transformed. He lightly swept his eyes to see the expressions of his fellow classmates. All he saw was pity, sympathy, joy, mockery, and those who were laughing at his misfortune. He felt gloomy in his heart but didn't say anything. Perhaps after finishing school today, their paths would separate and would keep on getting farther and farther apart. At least your father is fine. Zhang Kai didn't know what to say at the moment, he could only pat Li Yunmu's shoulder and sighed deeply. Soon, the teacher arrived and declared everyone's result one by one. There were no surprises. Li Yunmu's result was only average, it could only be considered as third-class grade. Getting this result was completely expected. Even after leaving the campus, he could at most attain a mediocre support job. Even becoming a low-level supervisor was very difficult. If Li Yunmu's father hadn't met with the accident and was still the captain of Camp Area C, then perhaps with some money, he could have entered the troops. Maybe he could have saved enough money to buy a dimensional crystal and awaken a trace of flux energy to enter War God troops was also a possibility earlier, but now most of his fellow students would keep getting farther and farther away from him. Because everyone knew his father had been the only survivor, it would be hard to avoid taking responsibility and he would probably be court-martialed. Moreover, after losing his 2 legs, it would basically be impossible for him to turn over new leaf. Let's go, don't mind them. Zhang Kai patted Li Yunmu's shoulders and dragged him outside. Wait. Kai, I still want to make the dragon's leap. Li Yunmu said seriously. At the same time, an emotion also appeared in his heart, seems like this brother has a pretty good character. After his father's accident, whatever little savings his family had would disappear, but at least he still has this genuine brother by his side. In this aspect, his life also couldn't be considered as a failure. He didn't require many friends, even if he had only one true friend. This was considered great luck. After experiencing the ups and downs of life, Li Yunmu had clearly realized this. Flux test? What is there to test? It's not like we don't understand our own limitations. Zhang Kai forced a smile. I still want to try. At this moment, Li Yunmu didn't know how to explain things to his best friend. After all, the events happened in the past few days were quite bizarre. Perhaps no one would believe him, even if he told someone the truth. Good, even though the result will be the same, going to test is also good. Let's go, I will accompany you. Under the astonished gaze of all his classmates, both of them walked towards the Alliance's office in the high school. Today, the commissioner from the Alliance, who was in charge of handling the flux test, was over there. It was estimated that from the 15 classes that were graduating this year, there were only 100 students at most that would participate in the flux test because the Lucky Wind City was only a poor small town. There weren't that many formidable or truly wealthy people living here. For the ordinary people, most of them knew themselves well, so why would they go there and make a joke of themselves? This year was also the same, the number of people that would be selected would be very little. Quickly look. Li Yunmu is going to make the dragon's leap? Heavens, am I seeing things? Since when did he start having signs of flux energy awakening? Haha, he isn't even worried about losing face just to create trouble. Do you really believe him? I would say that his father's matter must have completely driven him into the corner. Haha, he thinks that the dragon's leap is a walk in the park, that anyone who wants to make the leap can make the leap. Most of his fellow students kept on mocking him as the most important thing for a people was know their limits. Despite saying all this, when everyone realized that Li Yunmu was still determined to go and make a fool out of himself, a small group of people started following behind him as they all wanted to see the final outcome of his test. Both of them walked slowly towards the Alliance's office where the awakening test had already begun. Hey, isn't that Li Yunmu? Don't tell me that you have also come to participate in the flux test today? Haha, what a great joke. Once he entered, a familiar face sneered at him. According to Li Yunmu's memory, this person's name was Qian Fei. He was the son of one of the richest families of Lucky Wind City. Apparently, he had also come to take the test today. His family must have spent quite a fortune to obtain a dimensional crystal to help him. While it might be impossible to let Jianfei become a proper fluxer with his father's financial prowess, it was enough to allow Jianfei to produce a trace of flux energy. Mind your own business. Curse your mother, did the alliance allow only you to take the test? Zhang Kai angrily replied. Li Yunmu didn't bother with him. Previously, he would have already started a fight with him. Against such a small wealthy family from a small town, there was no need for Li Yunmu to give him any face. In the present situation of the alliance, their power and prestige fell short of Li Yunmu's father. But Li Yunmu didn't pay any attention to it, that was because it wasn't necessary, the facts would speak for themselves. After today, he, Li Yunmu, would let all the people of Lucky Wind City know that even though Li Zongmin had fallen, his son, Li Yunmu, was still here. Chapter 7, Half Awakened? What's that? Suddenly, the crowd parted way as an elegant female appeared in everyone's view. Yunmu, why have you come? Ali. Li Yunmu's expression changed slightly. This elegant girl was a goddess in the hearts of many in the entire 16th High School of Lucky Wind City. Not only was she extremely beautiful, the most important thing was that she had inherited the Flux disciple genes of her parents and was the 16th Lucky Wind City High School's most promising candidate for awakening and becoming a genuine Flux disciple in the future. Flux disciples, after becoming one, their position within the alliance skyrockets. Lin Li was the center of attention of the entire 16th High School today. Perhaps she herself had been waiting for this day for a long time. Mu, I have heard about your father's matters. When Lin Li walked past everyone who was lined up and came in front of Li Yunmu, she lightly said. Really? One's life can change at any moment. Only now did I realize that the power of my own strength is the only constant that forever remains eternal. Li Yunmu calmed down and mockingly laughed. He was calmly watching this beautiful girl's face. In ordinary times, everyone was clear within their heart that Lin Li should belong to him. Perhaps after several years, this elegant and beautiful woman, who was the goddess of countless students, would become Li Yunmu's wife and bear his children. After all, in the eyes of all outsiders, both of them were childhood friends. Moreover, with Li Yunmu's background, he was the most suitable choice for Lin Li, but who could have thought that at such crucial time, Li Yunmu's father would face such an unfortunate accident. I have half awakened in these past few days. Lin Li's tone changed and she said in a soft voice that only two of them could hear. While saying this, she couldn't control her emotions and a trace of excitement flashed through her face. So what? Li Yunmu's heart slightly tensed. Although my words would sound quite unpleasant for you at this moment in time, I want to travel farther on this planet and I want to enter the higher dimensional world to take a look. Even if I am only half awakened, I still want to go take a look. I'm sorry. Okay, I understand. Li Yunmu heavily sighed as he said this. But he didn't say anything more. Saying any more would be meaningless. Strictly speaking, the relationship between the two wasn't as close as what others had imagined, but they can't deny it. Within Lucky Wind City, with Lin Li's beauty as well as the innate talent of inheriting her parents' genes and succeeding them, in everyone's mind, these two were a perfect match. Relatives of these two also didn't refute it, even to the extent that Li Yunmu sometimes had this misconception that this beautiful woman should be his wife. Previously, he would have been fully satisfied with just that. However, now when he thought about it, it was clear that he was dreaming too much, but fortunately everything was fine since nothing had happened between them, but then again, what a pity. Then I pray that you successfully pass today's test. Li Yunmu took a deep breath. Did you specifically come over to take a look at my test? A flash of guilt passed through Lin Li's face. No, same as you, I have come to make the dragon's leap. After spitting out these words, a trace of determination passed through Li Yunmu's heart and he thoroughly erased this beautiful woman from deep within his heart. Now, he had clearly realized that being childhood sweethearts meant nothing. All the talk of their social status matching were nonsense. Since he had completely removed all thoughts of her from his heart, why should he wait for her? Keeping memories of her deep down in his heart would also be completely useless. With his heart cleansed, Li Yunmyu didn't hesitate any longer and walked away from Lin Li with big strides and arrived within the crowd of candidates waiting for the test. When Qing Fei went up for his turn, Li Yunmyu dragged him back down with one hand. Test it. Li Yunmyu didn't say anything to him, he just walked up and said loudly to the commissioner conducting the test. Li Yunmyu, what are you cutting in line for? Do you still think that your father has your back? Qing Fei cursed him without any restraint. No other reason, except the fact that I am going to become a Flux disciple now. Li Yunmyu scowled at him. Next instant, power exploded from his body. It resembled the frustrations that had accumulated in his heart due to his father's matters in these past few days as it came bursting out. In a split second, the test halo, with Li Yunmyu as the center, broke out with a violent force. All the surrounding candidates that were waiting for their turns, were knocked back one after another. They were alarmed by the shockwave produced by the fierce force. Flux disciple. What a surprise, he was actually a completely awakened Flux disciple. Within the test halo, Li Yunmyu's body that was emitting a deep and fascinating black flame that clearly made him seem like a crane in a flock of chicken. The black flame seemed to be the darkest light under the sun. It looked like it was sucking in all of the light in the vicinity. Indeed, this was the force of someone who had completely awakened and became a Flux disciple taking the first step in Flux's world. Great, fantastic, I didn't expect to encounter a naturally awakened seedling. Youngster, you're too fierce. But at least you have the talent and strength. A trace of extreme admiration passed through the eyes of the old man, who was the main person in charge of the testing team sent by the Alliance. Then do I still have to continue with the test or can I go down? At this instant, Li Yunmyu had closed his eyes and could clearly sense the power rushing forth from his body. The strength rushing forth from all over his body gave him the feeling that he could shatter the earth with one punch, it was just too intoxicating. What about producing trace of flux energy? What half awakened? In front of him, who had completely awakened, these were all just floating clouds. Haha, there is no need. Here is your Flux disciple badge, from this moment onwards, you will enjoy all the privileges and treatment given to Flux disciples by the Alliance. I represent the Lucky Wind City's Fluxer Guild in hopes that within a month, you will come to our office at Cloud Fort to register. Lucky Wind City's Fluxer Guild awaits your arrival. Even the commissioner had come out and declared. A person entering the Lucky Wind City's Fluxer Guild brought a smile to his face. A naturally awakened Flux disciple. Although within the whole central continent, a fully awakened Flux disciple wasn't considered anything. However, coming from Lucky Wind City and being only 16 years old, being able to reach this stage without the support of any external supplement made him a rarely seen talent. Li Yunmyu smiled faintly. He had never felt more excitement in his entire life, than when he took the miniature badge, but at the same time, he was also very calm. He had now easily obtained everything which he could only dream of obtaining before. He pinned the miniature badge, which was glimmering faintly, on the corner of his chest. He looked around once and saw that all of the people who were mocking him for attempting the test previously had lowered their heads. Including Qing Fei who had wanted to shame him. Even Lin Li, who had previously abandoned him, had now also lowered her head. All of their faces were filled with great shock. Father, your son hasn't disappointed you. Now that you can't protect this family, you son will. I will definitely obtain the legendary higher dimensional medicines and repair your legs, I swear. After being successfully advancing to Flux disciple, Li Yunmyu felt that all the mocking, doubt, abandoned, everything he had faced previously, in front of power, was ridiculous. After Li Yunmyu and Zhang Kai left, the testing site was filled with a deathly stillness, but the outside was in complete chaos. This year, a completely awakened Flux disciple had appeared in their 16th Lucky Wind City High School. Moreover, surprisingly, this person was someone whom they recognized as a complete failure that could only depend on his parents to pass his days. How is this possible? How has he completely awakened Flux energy? Could he have been concealing his strength? Lin Li could only gaze foolishly at the figure that was gradually walking away from her. This time, she felt that she had made a grave error and had lost something incredibly precious which had previously belonged to her, but now it was impossible to get it back. Chapter 8, Shadow's Avatar. After returning back to his house, Li Yunmu had completely calmed down. However, he was still firmly grasping the Flux Disciple badge that was issued to him in his hand. This slightly flickering small badge represented the highest social class in the whole central continent. It meant that his words now held more weight. Although it was only a tiny Flux Disciple badge, there wasn't anyone who didn't know of its significance. As expected, it wasn't long before he heard from his parents. "Son, quickly tell me what has happened? Your mom has just received a notification from the Alliance, saying that you have completely awakened your Flux energy and successfully became a Flux Disciple? Even now, I don't dare to believe that this is true. Moreover, your father, who was about to be investigated and made a scapegoat, then court-martialed, had his charges removed." Over the stellar H.A.C.K.'s astonished voice reached his ears. But it wasn't surprising that she was so astonished. After all, she understood her son the best. Until this point, let alone completely awakening Flux energy, her son couldn't even produce a trace of Flux energy. But now, he had become one of the central continent's strongest. "Mom, I also don't understand how this happened. All I know is that after hearing about Dad's matter that day, I was very upset and my Flux energy seemed to have vaguely awakened." Li Yunmu couldn't let any information about the super shadow hack system leak out, so he could only make up this excuse. This was not the truth, but it sounded more realistic than the truth. In any case, He was completely convinced with this vague answer. She would not have believed him otherwise. "That's good, it seems like my son is all grown up now. Your father no longer needs to take the blame and we won't be expelled out of the city and be forced to live in the slums." After talking for some time, they disconnected the stellar COMM. The fate of his family, which seemed completely doomed, had now changed. Moreover, it was completely reversed within a split second. This was the results of power. Just how much strength does he possess? Li Yunmu had never truly understood the fearfulness of strength, until now. Yes, from the instant that he was approved as a Flux Disciple and received the Flux Disciple badge, his fate had already begun to change. The tiny badge on his palm does not only make him seem virtuous, but it also allows him to receive a monthly salary of 1,000 fourth-dimensional coins from the Alliance. Moreover, it also represented that all his immediate dependents will get residence in cities forever without any condition. If Li Yunmu really wished to, by using his position, he could take a loan of 100,000 fourth-dimensional coins, without any interest rate. Using this tiny badge, he could also purchase an even more extravagant house in the safer secondary-grade cities. These were all the privileges of becoming a Flux Disciple. If they weren't given these benefits at the minimum, then why would people call the Flux test as Dragon's Leap? In the cases where the jump is successful, the person would become a dragon among men. Apart from this badge has many other great benefits. Of those benefits, there were two important benefits for this badge. The first was that this badge contains a portable dimensional space within it. As long as Li Yunmu imbues it with a trace of Flux energy, he could access the dimensional space inside. There was roughly a cubic meter of empty space inside, which could be used to store items. This was inside information which was only known to those who had been approved as Flux Disciples. As this badge was made with dimensional crystals, any ordinary person who hadn't awakened his Flux energy completely couldn't access it or use it, even if that person had the great influence or huge wealth. There were no exceptions. The second great benefit was that it can be used to enter a virtual dimension at any time and any place. This virtual dimension that was created with the cooperation of all 6 continents of the Alliance was also known as the Virtual Dimension World. Although under ordinary circumstances, anyone could enter the Virtual Dimension World at any time and any place, only some army headquarters, research facilities, and qualified universities have the necessary equipment to access this virtual world. Naturally, if someone's family possessed abundant wealth and was willing to pay a fortune of 5th-dimensional coins, they could naturally also achieve it. But presently, Li Yunmyo could use this badge to access the virtual dimension world. Regarding this point, he had waited for a long time for this opportunity, otherwise, why would he use that old-fashioned computer to play games? Virtual dimension world, here I come. Li Yunmyo couldn't wait any longer, he laid down comfortably on the bed and closed his eyes. Next, according to the functionality of the badge, he emitted a trace of flux energy and linked with the virtual dimension world. After he had done this, when he became sober again, what he saw when he opened his eyes shocked him. To his surprise, he discovered that he was in a completely different location. He was no longer in his bedroom, rather he was in a completely closed empty room. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the top of the empty room. This is your first time entering the virtual dimension world. Please set up a virtual character imitating yourself, as well as set all the data pertaining to yourself. Hearing this familiar voice without any emotions, Li Yunmyo quivered from head to toe. He almost thought that he had activated the shadow hack system again. However, he managed to react quickly. This kind of systems composed voice should have been derived from the core of the virtual dimension world built by the alliance of the 6 continents cooperating with each other. He calmed down slightly and soon discovered that in front of him, silently stood 2 3D virtual figures which hadn't been modeled yet. Without a doubt, these 2 avatars should be scaled according to his physique. If there were no accidents, Li Yunmyo's next step after entering the virtual dimension world was to take the initiative to set up his avatar as well as his profile in accordance with his real-life data. After all, even if he could set up his avatar according to his imagination in the virtual dimension, he still has to pay attention to the rules of the alliance and cannot just mess around. Wait a second, why are there 2 avatars? Impossible, isn't it said that every person can only have 1 avatar in the virtual world? Then why am I allowed to have 2? Ding! System has detected that the host has entered a special space formed in multi-dimensions. In this special space, your shadow hack avatar can totally be activated. In this special space, your shadow hack avatar will receive genuine data from your body, and use comparison and proportion tool to scale it. This time, he didn't hear wrongly. This time, the system's notification had certainly come from the Super Shadow Hack system. However, after hearing the notification, peril once again rose in Li Yunmyo's heart. System, you mean that if I set up more than 1 avatars, one of them will belong to my shadow? Li Yunmyo tried to ask. Yes, because your shadow's avatar is set up according to system's rules, it is thus immune from the detection and restriction of the core of this special space. What the heck? This system is too heaven-defying, isn't it? Although he had experienced the mysteriousness of the Super Shadow Hack system, Li Yunmyo hadn't anticipated that the system was even able to bypass the detection of the virtual dimension world created by the Alliance. However, after hearing the system's explanation, Li Yunmyo became aware that if he used his shadow to model the second avatar in virtual dimension world, then for the next month, he wouldn't be able to use the shadow to hunt monsters. As the shadow requires 1 month to synchronize the data in the virtual dimension world, after thinking about it over and over again, Li Yunmyo finally decided to give it a go. After all, it was necessary to hone the axe before cutting trees. Chapter 9, The Legendary Virtual Dimension World. With the intention of trying, Li Yunmyo first chose the figure on his left and began the modeling process. Since the avatar's body shape, appearance, and name had to be authenticated by the brain of virtual dimension world, there wasn't a need to make that many adjustments. Regardless of any adjustments, once others check the real authenticated data from the brain, they would know who the person really is. Thus, Lee Yunmyu didn't feel the need to make any adjustments. He could change his body shape to have a stronger and taller physique, change his face to make it more handsome, and even choose a more domineering name. But what's the point? After the peril his family had faced recently, Lee Yunmyu now found all these things futile. Soon, Lee Yunmyu made his own avatar and quickly made some adjustments without wasting much time. He then activated his modeled avatar. Sure enough, this avatar that was standing silently on the left side became completely bright. Indeed, as stated in the rumors, it was simply another him, a clone. From his body's strength data to his recently awakened flux energy strength, everything was exactly the same. However, when he selected the other figure silently standing on the right side, only then did he discover what the system's previous words about not being bound by rules meant. The modifications allowed in the second figure completely exceeded his expectations, as there was no upper limit to the number of modifications allowed. In other words, it only depended on what Lee Yunmyu wants. He could model the figure as he like, turning it into a giant creature or perhaps even changing the sex from male to female, as long as he wanted it. Whatever modifications he did were allowed and wouldn't be restricted by the brain of the virtual dimension world. Naturally, Lee Yunmyu wasn't stupid enough to court disaster by becoming high profile. If he really modeled the shadow into some giant creature, then it would certainly give rise to a high-level investigation by the brain. There was even a possibility that it may catch the Alliance's attention. Thus, although he could disregard all the rules of virtual dimension world, Lee Yunmyu remained cautious and earnestly used the figure to form an avatar of a 20-something youth. Features? Having regular features was good since they won't attract anyone's attention. With an ordinary face, no one would expect that he was the controller. Figure? Oh, this must be properly planned. A good body build is greatly beneficial for fights, so he must scale it according to humanity's prime figures. Height of 185 centimeters, the optimum height, tight clothes, body filled with flesh, 6 packs, V-shaped body, mermaid line, thick waist, long legs, strong arms. As for the name? Lee Yun would be good. Finally, the setup is complete, the avatar is complete. After Lee Yunmyu had set up his avatar, next instant, the silent figure standing on the right side, released a bright light and activated. Dang, this is my avatar. When the avatar activated and Lee Yunmyu saw it, he jumped in fright. When Lee Yunmyu had initially created the avatar, he had just used an ordinary face without any outstanding characteristics, let alone handsome. However, this ordinary face was scaled with humanity's most optimum body frame, and as a result, the whole avatar was surrounded in bright light and transformed into an outstanding figure with that kind of calm and cool face with a cold smirk, which no one could resist looking at. He was really overreaching. However, since everything had been determined, Lee Yunmyu could only accept this. Although these days, the avatars were made to be high profile and attract attention, Lee Yunmyu's initial intention was the complete opposite. But as long as others don't know that he was the controller, then there would be no problem. He was convinced that with the cover of the H.A.C.K system, perhaps the brain of virtual dimension world or even the Alliance's investigation wouldn't discover the existence of this avatar. But he didn't have complete assurance. Enter. After setting up the avatar, with a thought, his consciousness descended into the avatar on the left, which entered the genuine virtual dimension world. When he faintly opened his eyes, his surroundings had changed to that of another world. Was this the world from the legends where humans lived before the Dark Ages? At this moment, he was at the center of a highly developed and prosperous city. His surroundings were filled with numerous skyscrapers, dazzling neon-colored lamps, large billboards with different poses and expressions, and trains suspended in the sky. At that instant, Lee Yunmyu was shocked to see this highly developed and flourishing city. He remained there for a long time. Was the ancestor civilization before the Dark Ages so prosperous? The sky wasn't filled with chaotic energy flowing around, and the blue sky could be clearly seen with the bright sunset glow and ardent sun. The lake water wasn't even a little bit contaminated, even the bottom could be seen clearly. Indeed, it was as said in the legends, water and sky merging together as one color. No wonder, all the adults from the mainland of the central continent spent great amounts of money to purchase a dimensional helmet to enter the virtual dimension world. Today, I have the chance to experience this. Li Yunmu stood at the same place in shock for a long time like a villager, only then did he come to his senses and laugh at himself. He looked up and began to casually stroll around in the city that was once a part of the central continent. Reportedly, the time passed 3 times faster in the virtual world compared to real world. In other words, 1 hour in the real world would be 3 hours in the virtual dimension world. This inequality in time scale was also the reason why many people of the continent frequently enter this world, as compared to regular people who don't have access to this, they have 3 times more time to exploit. In the virtual world's central continent, sometimes people with lineage from other continents can be seen. While he was walking in the central continent, sure enough, in a short period of time, he saw many people with different skin color, whose ancestors had come from other continents. Blonde blue-eyed white people, black people with black hair, people with brown hair, brown eyes and brown skin, people of the desolate race coming from desolate continent, as well as Neptune people coming from the northern sea. My God! Only now was Li Yunmu aware of his vain life. The world was so large, he was previously just a frog living in a well. It was still his first time seeing so many different colored people. Although there were different colored people residing in the central continent, living in the small Lucky Wind city all his life, he had never seen so many of them. Especially the people of the desolate race from the desolate continent as well as the Neptune people from the northern sea, it was the first time Li Yunmu encountered these people. Just seeing this, Li Yunmu became aware of his naivety. A brand new world had opened in front of him, destroying his native thoughts. Wow, look quickly, it's the old bully Zhi from desolate continent. He crossed the ocean and came to the central continent to challenge Gu Zhilai of the war god temple on our side. Reportedly, he had defeated 3 famous knights of the war god temple successively. Oh my god, the body of the people from desolate continent are very formidable. Can the people of our central continent stop him? Suddenly a group of people gathered together at the plaza of the commercial center and started looking at the big screen on top of the plaza. Yes, dimensional battlefield. Li Yunmu couldn't help but be enticed by the group of people and raised up his head to watch the 2 formidable avatars on the big screen with waves surging in his heart and blood boiling. Chapter 10, Dimensional Store. Dimensional Battlefield. Li Yunmu had heard about it countless times from other people. Every time his father spoke of it, it would make Li Yunmu's blood boil. Previously, every time he heard about this, it always felt like hearing a myth within a legend. The main character and others within the tale, everything seemed so far from him, so far that he couldn't even touch it, but now, he had personally entered this mythical world. Moreover, he himself could become one of the protagonists. It had to be said, the dimensional battlefield within the virtual dimension world was considered a sacred temple in the hearts of all common people of Zhone continent. All the people wanted to personally come and participate in it, even if just as a spectator and take a look. As the name implied, the dimensional battlefield was a virtual battle system closest to reality. Every person's virtual avatar is bound with the real strength data and can thus fight as if they were the avatar itself. Here, all the Flux disciples could abandon all apprehensions and fight recklessly. After engaging in one fight after another, they could temper themselves and increase their strength. Thinking up till here, Li Yunmu became lost in the fight between the 2 fighters on the big screen. For him, all this excitement had been too far away. Presently, I have awakened Flux energy completely, but what would be my level in this dimensional battlefield? An urge rose within Li Yunmu's heart. Next instant, using the Flux Disciple badge, he entered within the dimensional battlefield. Strength detection, enter Flux Disciple. Personal accomplishments, none. Combat skills, none. Bloodlines possessed, none. Affiliation with fighting team, none. You have entered the virtual battlefield first time. the system requests that you choose a training battlefield according to your requirements. Without a doubt, he was a complete rookie here. The core found out all information related to Li Yunmu's avatar. Li Yunmu quickly received all the paths to enter the dimensional battlefield: low density of low-level monsters environment, medium density of low-level monsters environment, high density of low-level monsters environment, ocean battlefield with low-level monsters. Apart from this, there was still a list of choices of battle matches compatible with personal battles. Without hesitation, Li Yunmu chose a battle match battlefield with monsters. He had already been practicing killing monsters with the H.A.C.K system, but after becoming a Flux disciple, he hadn't genuinely battled with someone similar to him. Matched successfully. Next moment, Li Yunmu randomly appeared in a tropical rainforest. Once he inspected his surroundings, he seemed to be on a jungle island with a diameter of 1 kilometer. The matched enemy couldn't be seen anywhere. A small blade had randomly appeared in Li Yunmu's hand. After he completed his preparations, he entered deep into the jungle. Suddenly, a sharp arrow revealed itself, rushing towards him with frightening strength. "Youngster, aren't you a rookie? Haha, how brave of you to dare come to battle, just wait quietly to be crushed." The same time as the arrow arrived, a sinister laugh came from the jungle. However, when Li Yunmu, this complete rookie, saw that this arrow was going to pierce through his skull, his body instinctively leaned and dodged the deadly arrow. Li Yunmu stayed foolishly at the same place after dodging. Clearly, he hadn't expected this situation, as he believed that he would have been killed by the opponent's sneak attack. Only then did he realize that his body had responded instinctively. Could it be that these past few days, while risking my life and blood to kill monsters using the system, I have subconsciously developed some kind of battle instinct? Thinking about this, Li Yunmu's confidence was greatly boosted. He began listening to his surroundings with rapt attention, like when he was controlling the shadow in the neighborhood lawn, calmly listening to any sound of activity within the grass, removing all distracting thoughts. "I found you." Li Yunmu smirked, and within an instant, his whole body like a tank and charged towards the location where the enemy was hidden. Shoo! An arrow was shot towards again him. But Li Yunmu, who was prepared this time, instantly decided on how to dodge it. Shoo! 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 While he was charging, the enemy successively changed locations a few times and fired multiple arrows. The final arrow was even covered with flux energy. The arrow had radiated a pitch-black ray. The strength was even more formidable. But after experiencing the attack of the enemy several times, even if it was a formidable flux energy arrow, it was still in vain, as the arrow missed. Li Yunmu dodged left and turned right. He was still charging directly, but it carried a unique and profound rhythm, dodging enemies' arrows one after another. "You lose, rookie." Li Yunmu put the blade to the enemy's neck. Both of them could see the matched enemy's basic information. Li Yunmu became aware that the other party was also a new Flux disciple, but how did the enemy move with such dominance? Could it be because it was his first time entering the dimensional battlefield, the enemy wanted to belittle him? How is it possible? Are you really a rookie who had just entered the dimensional battlefield for the first time? The enemy asked, with both shock and amazement mingled in his voice. Die! Li Yunmu didn't reply back. He just slashed down the blade without much thinking. The enemy avatar lost support and shattered, gradually disappearing. Within the dimness, not knowing whether it was real or an illusion, Li Yunmu kept looking at the enemy's disappearing image. It shattered into several light granules and entered into his body. Ding! You have defeated the enemy in the virtual dimension world. You have absorbed 3 space element points from the enemy's body. Ding! Host has comprehended the initial level of arrow evasion step evasive foundation skill during the fight just now. You are at the first stage of arrow evasion step evasive skill, which is classified as an independent skill. If the host wants to increase the proficiency of arrow evasion step skill, then he would be required to practice by himself. Li Yunmu turned lifeless. He was certain that these two system beeps were not from the core system of the virtual dimension world, but from the super shadow hack system. System, what is this space element? Why can I absorb the space element from the enemy by defeating them? Furthermore, what is this arrow evasion step skill? Lee Yunmyu was a little agitated at this moment. It should be known that this was the first time system had introduced it. After using the hack system for so many days, he believed that there were only experience points and ability points. Space element is source power from the nucleus of the space dimension, its full name would be Space Essence Element Force. After the host defeats or perhaps kills an enemy possessing elemental space energy, then a portion of space element would be absorbed into the host's body. The higher the opponent's space element strength, the greater the amount of space element will be absorbed. The system promptly replied. Cough cough, system, can you explain in human words? Lee Yunmyu couldn't help himself, he really couldn't understand the complicated words used by the system. After a moment of silence, system replied again. In accordance with the host's world's understanding, the host only needs to defeat Fluxers, which would allow the host to absorb a particular amount of flux energy essence from them.